All right, well, thanks everyone for coming to this second political session that we have going on today. Thanks for the folks who came over to the Senator Bennett one that just wrapped up. Senator Hickenlooper needs no introduction. Senator, you're kind of like on a screen, on a TV across from me, so just so you know, I'm like talking to your face. I don't know what it looks like for you, but we got a room full of people here. So I just want to jump in. Obviously, a lot going on in Washington, but why don't we just start with, the news this morning of Senator Feinstein's death. I kind of asked Senator Bennett about this as well, but I wonder if you had spent any time with her yesterday, if you'd seen her before this happened, if there's any indication of anything that was going on, and just if you want to reflect a little bit on her legacy in the Senate. I know it's quite a big legacy.
Well, she lived a life of firsts. Again, she's a former mayor, so us former mayors all stick together. And she lived this life of first where she always was she was marching to the beat of a different drummer, her drummer. And she was a leader in women's rights movements, in organized labor, in making sure that there's civil rights for all people, a woman's right to choose. I mean, you go down the list. She was a leader from the beginning in so many of the movements that have really changed this country, and we're going to miss her. I saw her yesterday. She came in yesterday morning to vote on for cloture on the continuing resolution, the CR we're trying to get through to keep the government from shutting down. It's truly ironic, but fitting that one of her very last activities was voting in the U.S. Senate, an institution that she believed in so much.
Did you have any conversation with her yesterday, or was it just kind of a passing? I mean, I wonder, we're still kind of learning maybe what happened, but I don't know if there was any indication that she was doing more unwell than she had been, or if she said anything to you in kind of that last few hours of her life.
She didn't say anything. She kind of came in and went out. And she certainly she's looked frail these last couple months. But I didn't think anything, I didn't think she looked abnormally frail.
So the other big thing that's kind of roiling Washington right now that I think you mentioned, obviously, is the shutdown. We're 36 hours away from the federal government shutting down. And you're in an interesting position because you've served, as governor under a shutdown, at least one, maybe two. And now you're in the Senate kind of dealing with this playing out on that scale. And I wonder, in terms of effects to Colorado, you saw this during the floods when the shutdown happened in 2013. And then the 18-19 shutdown was like the longest ever while you were governor. I wonder what are three things you're really worried about in terms of the effects that are going to happen to Colorado if the shutdown happens. What the on-the-ground implications will be.
Well, in a funny way, the shutdown happens at the same time because it's the end of the federal fiscal year. So right here you are, right, September, the end of the third quarter, and we had just come through the floods in 2013, and it had been devastating for those mountain communities. No place was hit harder than Estes Park, and the community there had spent 3 weeks feverishly digging out the muck and the gravel and the stones on the floors of their stores. The restaurants, the curio shops, the gift shops, all were a mess, and to a person, they were ready to get open because those first couple of weeks in October, the leaves are changing. And so more people come up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and that was going to be a big shot in the arm for their economy that had been knocked on its back by the flood. Well, I went up there on a Friday, the Friday right before I think the shutdown was going to happen on Tuesday that year, 2013. And I went up there on Friday and met with the mayor and a lot of the small business owners, and they told me how serious this was going to be. And I didn't know they were going to close Rocky Mountain National Park. So I called Sally Jewell, who was the former head of REI, and at that point she was Secretary of the Interior. And I said, we got to do something. You've got to, if this is what it takes, the state of Colorado, we will pay the employees in Rocky Mountain National Park to make sure it stays open, and that our normal economic, the burst of energy our economy gets up there from all these people coming in and looking at the turning leaves, we don't want to lose that. We want to make sure that happens we'll pay their wages. And we did. We paid several $100,000 in wages to the federal government because we were shut down for almost 3 weeks in 2013. I don't think that's going to happen this time, but certainly we have to be prepared. The other things that will hurt Colorado, I mean, we have between military personnel and government workers, we've got almost, not quite, but over 90,000 people that are going to have to be sidelined, and they're not going to be getting income, and probably most of those families are going to spend less money, so it's going to dilute the spending power of the entire state. I mean, people will notice it depending on where the concentrations are, but certainly a lot of small businesses in Colorado will see a downturn for as long as this shutdown takes place, it goes on or continues. What's the point? I mean, there's no real point in this shutdown. It's a very small minority of people in the House of Representatives that are making unreasonable demands and going back on agreements that had been reached weeks ago on what the budget, what the budget cuts should look like. Everyone's agreeing that we got to restrain the expansion of the deficit, and the budget that they've agreed to was going to do that. But now they've gone back and they want more cut spending, and they want to draw attention to other issues. I think the third place it affects Colorado would be, and this really it affects the whole country. We have serious rivals, adversaries in the world right now. Not just Russia with their invasion of Ukraine. It's China, it's Iran, it's North Korea. We are showing them a vulnerability in our form of government when we allow ourselves to be this divided. And it's not just always in democracy, great, people can have free speech, we can grind government down to a halt. It makes us look weak. It makes us look divided. It makes us look vulnerable. And this is a time when we don't want to look vulnerable to the likes of China and Russia. So I hope that we'll get, even if we shut down, I will hope that we'll have a 1 or a 2 day shutdown and get back to work and roll up our sleeves. And again, we should be able to find compromises on almost all the issues around the budget.
Maybe one of the solutions is to change the federal fiscal year away from leaf peeping season, so this doesn't happen every year. But
I'll put a motion on that on the floor tomorrow.
All right, make sure you name that one after the Colorado Sun. Kind of along that vein, right? I mean, talking about the shutdown, obviously this is a House Republicans problem, and our delegation, our 3 Republicans in the House, are split on this, right? Lamborn and Buck are really fighting against a shutdown where you have Lauren Boebert, who's kind of effectively cheering it on. She's part of that Matt Gaetz, Freedom Caucus, far-right group in the House that's pushing McCarthy to make more cuts and shape things the way that she wants. I wonder, if you've talked to Boebert or her office to get her to reconsider. I'm thinking about leaf peeping season. Maroon Bells is in her district. That's going to be affected by this. A lot of federal land there. Have you had any conversations with her?
I have not, but I'll make sure that our office talks to her office, and I'll reach out to her because you're exactly right. She's got more common sense than that, or at least I hope she does, to take a stand where you're really not fighting for anything you're going to get, right? 15, radical Republicans are not going to shut down the government for a year, and they're certainly not going to cut off funding for Ukraine. That's another one of their big issues. They're making a statement just for the principle, which again, sometimes I've done that. Sometimes it's important, but shutting down the government's not the way to do that. I mean, we've been dealing with a lot of this kind of grandstanding where people are threatening to shut things down or make draconian positions, and then doing it. In the old days, people would threaten these things, but they wouldn't do it. Senator Tuberville continues to deny normal promotions for our generals, our highest military promotions. We're now up to, I think it's 374 individuals, 1-star generals trying to become 2-star generals, 2-star generals becoming 3-star generals. They can't assume their new commands. And yet, by law, the person who had been in command, in that specific command, has been termed out. So now you've got somebody who's pretty far down the food chain and in an acting position, making decisions that they're probably not experienced enough to make wisely. Or they're not going to be, their training and their experience has not prepared them to make the best decisions that we could have. And again, we have serious rivals in the world. These kinds of things where, whether it's a government shutdown or stopping military promotions, just for the sake of a moral principle, that's not good politics, or at least it shouldn't be good politics.
I'm going to move on to talk about some of your policy priorities in Congress that I know are being held up right now by the shutdown conversation. But one of the things you've celebrated a lot since you were elected and arrived in Washington is the creation of the Colorado River Caucus with other Western senators and I think House members as well. But we haven't heard really much about what you guys are up to. And I wonder if you can provide us an update about how those negotiations are going, what the kind of backroom discussions look like. Is it cordial? Are people screaming at each other? What's happening there?
No, it's still very cordial, and I think, we put together, I always loved the Western Governors Association because you had a bipartisan group of governors that would work together to help each other. Republicans helping Democrats, Democrats helping Republicans. Whether it was sage grouse or climate change or, figuring out how we're going to get our economic engine going stronger. Governors loved working together in a bipartisan way. The Senate didn't have that. So it took a couple years. But now, especially around the Colorado River, we've got the Rocky Mountain Bipartisan Senate Caucus, and we include California in that. And through that, we've got the senators talking to each other, and we've got Arizona and California who have historically been the big adversaries in these disagreements around water of the Colorado River. They are working together. And there's a lot of incentives for them to do that. Government has generally, we have carrots and sticks. We can threaten to do bad things if people don't work together, or we can offer incentives when they do work together. And through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Inflation Reduction Act, we've got, roughly a little more than $12 billion for water infrastructure, for water projects. And the vast majority of that is going to be for the Colorado River. So this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Arizona and California to work together. There are a lot of carrots. And it's not going to, if they fight each other and we end up going to court, and this would go immediately to the Supreme Court, if they challenge the decisions being made by the Bureau of Reclamation. If it goes to the Supreme Court, who knows what happens, but certainly, historically, it never resolves anything. It just takes time and money. So that becomes a stick in its own right. The beauty of the senators, of the bipartisan Senate caucus, is that we have Republican senators and Democratic senators really working together with their water experts and with their governors. The senators aren't trying to make the decision. The senators are trying to facilitate direct conversations and make sure that we have sufficient carrots so that we can make real progress. And we have. So we have figured out what the cuts look like through 2026, and now what California and Arizona are looking at, and all of the lower basin and upper basin states, really looking at what's the long-term vision going to be if this aridification continues, if we continue to have this, what appears to be a drought, but if it's really just a change in climate, it could be much more than a drought. It could be permanent. Obviously, there'll still be fluctuations. We saw a very moist summer this year in Colorado, a very wet winter. Hopefully, we can have another winter and summer like that in the coming year. But I think most scientists believe that we're getting drier. And so hopefully the compromises that are being made between those of the upper basin states like Utah and Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, and then the lower basin states like Nevada and California and Arizona, hopefully those compromises are going to lead to long-standing beneficial changes, more efficiencies. The goal here, obviously, is to make sure we continue to grow as much food and raise as much livestock as possible with, obviously, diminished water. And I think we can get there, but it's only if we work together.
Do you feel like the caucus played a role in the agreement that was reached between the states? I mean, is there any anecdotes you can kind of provide us about how that played out, in kind of a tangible way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have specific anecdotes, but it was interesting to watch. Alex Padilla is a freshman senator from California, very talented. He's going to be he is already a great senator. He's going to be a real leader in the Senate. And I would say the same thing about Mark Kelly, the freshman senator from Arizona. And so those two have really worked hard to, create a bipartisan, objective lens by which we look at, here's what we used to do, and here's what that looked like, and here's the new reality, and how do we get from what we used to do up to this new reality? And both of them are willing to make compromises, negotiate in good faith to recognize that neither side's going to get everything they want, but we'll do a lot better by coming to our own agreement than having the Bureau of Reclamation come in and from the outside inject an agreement that perhaps both sides will be unhappy with.
And we're about halfway through here, so if people have questions, we'll have an opportunity at the end, so just think about them, and Elliot's going to run around with the microphone if folks have them. Senator, I want to talk a little bit about more staying on the environmental idea. What your opinion is of how the Biden administration has handled the issue of drilling on federal land and in Colorado and in the rest of the country. I'm thinking specifically about BLM land. The oil and gas industry, I know, is upset about the regulations that have been put in place, and they've certainly always kind of counted on you as an ally, and I wonder where you are on that, and if you're facing pressure from the industry, to pressure the Biden administration to be more lenient or to rethink some of these regulations that they're putting in place.
Well, I think we've all got to recognize that this climate change is real. It's accelerating faster than almost any scientist expected. We're facing changes in our weather that are truly extreme. And by any measure, and whether you're talking about the wildfires or the tornadoes or the hurricanes along the coast, the cost of this weather change is going to be ultimately in the trillions of dollars. So every year we delay, every year that we slow down this transition to clean energy, we're doing far more harm to ourselves. That it's going to cost much more money to rectify. Look at the fires in Western Canada this summer, and we were breathing that air for a big chunk of the summer. But that's more methane, more CO2 from the combustion of the wood. That's putting more carbon into the atmosphere at a frightful level. So, sure, do we want to cut back on drilling? Do we want to move away from oil and gas into clean energy? Yes, as fast as we can. Is that going to happen tomorrow? No. So the real challenge here is to recognize that we're going to need some combination of oil and natural gas for this transition into a clean energy future. And to do that, we want to make sure that our jobs in Colorado are not put at a disadvantage. That said, how do we get more natural gas to replace more coal faster? Well, a lot of that natural gas is going to come from Colorado, from Texas, from some of these western states, and we can liquefy it and send it to places like India and China. A lot of people disagree with that, but the savings when you replace coal, and oftentimes what they're burning in Asia is very dirty forms of coal. When you can replace that with wind and solar, the reduction in carbon emissions is so dramatic that it's worth drilling those extra wells in places where you can get natural gas. That doesn't mean that we don't continue to go as hard and as fast as we can to clean energy. And the key is, it's like, can you chew gum and walk at the same time? Yeah, you can do that. And we should be able to do this. Make sure that we have enough traditional energy to have a smooth transition, and we don't put working people at risk of having to pay $10 a gallon or $15 a gallon for their gasoline. but at the same time recognize that this transition is going to happen. And part of that transition, as we do cut back on the total amount of crude oil that we use, prices are going to fluctuate. And we've got to do as good a job as we can dealing with that. And in many cases, when you cut back, you're going to have an excess of hydrocarbons and oil and natural gas. And probably that price, as it fluctuates, will probably come down sometimes, which is going to make it more attractive at a time when we want to use less of it. And that's all got to be part of the thinking for this, the planning behind this great transition.
I know when you were in Colorado meeting with some reporters recently, there was a talk about term limits in Congress and the age of people in the Senate. And obviously, polls are showing right now that voters are concerned about Joe Biden's age as he runs for re-election. I know people are concerned about Donald Trump's age as well. But Joe Biden is a member of your party, and I wonder if you're worried about his capacity to serve. Where you kind of come down on that?
Well, I think he seems healthy. And the last couple times I've talked to him, he's been very vigorous. It's been a while. But I was out today at the investiture for General C.Q. Brown as as of an hour ago, he's the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, replacing Mark Milley. Mark Milley gave an amazing speech. Everybody should get a chance to try and listen to that once it gets out and online. Very inspirational speech. But Joe Biden was there, gave a rousing speech, talked about our global presence and this is being the greatest fighting force in the history of the world, and he's right about that. Anyway, his voice was filled with power and emotion. He didn't seem too old to me, so I think he's got another 4 years in him.
All right, I'm going to switch back maybe to talking a little bit more about policy. And I don't know if you've heard about this from high country communities, but one of the interesting ideas that they're talking about now with housing is maybe using national forest land, federal land, to build housing on. And I wonder if you're having any discussions with the Forest Service about that, if it's something that Congress could take on, or if there's a way for your office to make it easier for some of these places like Vail or Aspen or in Summit County to find some more land to build affordable housing on.
So I started talking about this back when I was governor, and I have talked to the Department of Agriculture. I have talked to the head of the BLM, which is in part of the Department of the Interior. In many of the western parts of the state, the BLM land is more attractive. I think the way it might work, and I think it's doable. I genuinely think it's doable, but we'll all have to chip in. In other words, the mountain communities, whether it's a municipality or the county, they're going to have to chip in as well. And obviously some of that housing is going to have to house like Forest Service workers or federal workers in some way. But I think the beauty, we probably could do like 99-year leases rather than sales. It's difficult to go through and sell the land. I mean, you can do that, but it's just much more difficult. But I think 99-year leases could get us where we need to be and get us that land. Oftentimes what happens is the Forest Service land or the BLM land is somehow separated away from where the extension of the sewer service is or where the water service is. So it becomes harder to hook up that piece of land than something that's right in town already. But again, each situation is different. It's an excellent thing we should be looking at and let each local community assess whether their cost versus benefit makes this a good solution. But I do believe that the federal government is willing to sit down and discuss, in most cases, letting their land be part of the solution. Again, not in a remote natural landscape, but in those places right in close to towns.
Right. Let me check the room real fast. Does anyone have questions? One back there. Let me ask you another question while we're getting the mic over there. Our Sunfest slogan this year is for a better Colorado, and I wonder if you can kind of briefly, while we're getting set up on the audience questions, if you can describe what a better Colorado looks like for you.
Well, it's not that different from when I was running for governor back in 2010. I think a better Colorado is a Colorado that is better for everyone, and one way to do that is through education. Is making sure that whether it's apprenticeships, experiential learning, everybody has a good chance at a good job. And by a good job, I mean a job that leads to a better job, that leads to a better job, that creates a career. And I know Governor Polis has worked very hard on expanding apprenticeships, continuing to build on that work. And, you know, I think that we have the opportunity in Colorado to really lift up the entire state, not just the people at the top, but the entire economic food chain, and, you know, create a better life for everybody. And that it also means better public safety. It means, as Mayor Johnson has said again and again, housing, making sure that everybody has a place to live, a home. These are all components that are, you know, what we need to make, you know, a better Colorado.
All right, awesome. We have an audience question for you.
Rhonda Dern here from Evergreen, Colorado. My husband used to work with you years ago in another lifetime. I wanted to thank your legislative aide, Julia Berry, for meeting with us September 13th in Washington to celebrate 50 years of the Endangered Species Act and to ask for your continued support of that. We traveled to DC with 60 of us, ESA advocates from the Colorado Sierra Club, to thank you for your support of the ESA and to ask you to continue to fully restore our funding. As you know, funding cuts have drastically reduced the ESA support well below the amount needed to protect our endangered species. We're asking you to stand strong against the GOP's 38 bills aimed at gutting the ESA, which has been historically successful in the protection of endangered species. We're asking you to co-sponsor Congressman Joe Negus's H.R. 195 to establish a national biodiversity strategy for protecting biodiversity for current and future generations. Native biodiversity protects ecosystems and human health from catastrophes, including climate warming. The administration rightfully calls the climate crisis the biggest threat of our time. Protecting and restoring native biodiversity. The funds for the ESA and HR 195 are desperately needed as wolves come home to Colorado. May I count on you to support our keystone species coming home to Colorado to protect our biodiversity?
I don't know if you missed the last part of that, but it was effectively, do you support wolf reintroduction in Colorado?
Sure. So that's a lot of questions at once.
Let's just start with, let's do the wolf one, because that is one that we're talking about a lot here at this conference.
Yeah, no, I have supported the wolf reintroduction with that contingency that we need to make sure that if farmers or ranchers lose livestock to wolves, that they're compensated for that. I don't think it's responsible for, you know, people sitting in our urban centers to, you know, imagine a great wilderness that has wolves once again running through it. I support that 100%. But I also think that we have to, as we do that, before we do that, we make sure that we're going to compensate farmers and ranchers who end up having to pay a price for that, which obviously I don't think is anyone's intention. The question's also about you know, national biodiversity and the EPA. I've always been a strong supporter. I mean, I look at, we are quite likely going through a mass extinction, you know, the sixth mass extinction in the history of our planet. And we need to be looking at how do we work together to increase not just the biodiversity, but the absolute health of our ecosystems. And that's going to take everybody working together. It's not just us or just them, it's everybody. I also think in frame of climate change that we should convene a group of people to discuss how are we going to build transmission lines to get clean energy where it does the most good. How are we going to go faster? Again, I don't want to in any way truncate the power of the EPA and the importance of biodiversity, but we are going to have to figure out a way to get permitting for a lot of these infrastructure investments just to go faster, or else we're going to lose this battle to climate change. Same thing with trying to find enough lithium and enough copper. It's a real problem. So anyway, and I'll reach out to Joe Neguse. I haven't heard about his House Bill 195, but I'll get on it. It sounds like something I would be more than happy to support.
And Senator, do you have time for one more question just before we let you go?
Unfortunately, we have to run. I'm so sorry, Jesse.
All right, that's okay. We promise you guys
I
11:30.
apologize.
No,
I got
thank you
one-
so much, and good luck. I hope you're not stuck there for months on end.
Yeah, you and me both. All right. Thanks so much. You say hi to my wife and my infant
Oh, well, we
while
will.
I'm stuck here in Washington.
Thanks, Senator.